At the end of the poem of the Cid, very much like at the end of the Song of Roland, we're confronted with a, a trial by combat scene that really evokes the judgment of God. This is particularly interesting because in both of these texts, what on their surface at least are narratives of the battles between Christian and Saracen, or between Christian and Moor. Really, the tales themselves are more complex, and they have a lot to do with the internal struggles, for example, in the court of Charlemagne in the Song of Roland, or in the case of the Cid, the Spanish court, and the court of the Cid's king, and especially his relationship, the Cid's relationship with the Infantes, the royal princes who wish to marry his daughters and then end up abusing and abandoning them. So in both cases, the trial by combat sequence not only gives us this insight into this idea of how the judgment of God was an important aspect in these cultures, but also give us some real insight into the fact that, for example, in the Cid, the good Moors versus the evil Infantes shows that it really problematizes our understanding of the relationships between Christians and Muslims and within the Spanish court, or the French court in the case of the Carolingians. So the treason of, for example, the Ganelon in the court of Charlemagne, that's the ostensible reason that there has to be this trial, right? Because Roland is already dead. How is this going to be made any better by punishing Ganelon? Well, and the answer is that this is really about treason against Charlemagne. And the exact same point is made in the poem of the Cid, that it's the treason of the Infantes, because of course this was never the Cid's idea for his daughters to marry these princes. He basically goes along with it out of loyalty to his king. And therefore, when the Infantes betray the trust of these daughters, and by extension the trust of the Cid, it's really a betrayal of the trust of the king. And this is where the little house of cards of the Infantes really begins to collapse, because the king becomes quite adamant on this point, though he originally didn't want to be, of course. And in the sequence of the trial by combat here, we don't have the same fatality as we do at the end of the combat between the two champions representing Ganelon and the sword of justice being employed on behalf of Roland that we have in the Song of Roland. Here, it's interesting. The Cid had gifted his two great swords to the two Infantes, and he gets them back when he avenges himself upon the Infantes. And then one of the things that the Infantes fear most is to be faced with these mighty swords. And I don't think you have to be Sigmund Freud to see how the swords represent the martial might and manhood of the Cid. And everything that's good about the Cid really is lacking in the Infantes. And they more or less know this, especially after the episode with the lion, right? They're the cowards with the lion as opposed to the cowardly lion, right? But when they are confronted in the trial by combat sequence with these swords, they literally kind of melt into pools of tears and terror. So this also doesn't just underscore the judgment of God in the whole trope of the trial by combat, but also this idea of true heroism, true manhood, true martial prowess, as opposed to cowardly bluster and bluff, and the relying upon position in society, and the internal political machinations of the Infantes, as opposed to the to the real abilities of their former father-in-law, which is really represented in the swords that are brought against the Infantes in the trial by combat sequence at the very end.